Two types of competition that we talk about when we talk about density-dependent limiting factors are interspecific competition and intraspecific competition. Interspecific competition occurs between different species occupying the same ecological community. So, for example, in the picture that you see here, you have a hyena and a lioness. And they're in direct competition for the same food sources, because even though the hyena is a scavenger, the lioness is going to be in direct competition with the hyena because she's going to go hunting for the gazelles, the zebras, any other grazing animal. And of course, the hyena is going to lie around and wait, waiting for her to kill her prey. But then, of course, remember, since the hyena is a scavenger, he's going to be like, all right, I want to eat that. And of course, the lioness is going to be like, hello, I just caught that and I'm going to eat it too. So they are going to be in direct competition with one another. Interspecific competition can lead to competitive exclusion and resource partitioning, which we'll talk about in lesson 11.1. Then there's intraspecific competition. Intraspecific competition occurs between members of the same species. This involves competing for the same limited resource base in the environment, but this also reduces fitness for both individuals. And this type of competition leads to logistic growth of populations. Because both individuals are competing for the same resources in their habitat, intraspecific competition is often far more powerful at regulating population size than interspecific competition. Notice here you have an animal called a hartebeest, and they're competing with one another. Here they're competing for a mate. As you see two males that are fighting with one another for the same limited resource base, the females. There are also what are called density-independent limiting factors. These limiting factors affect all populations equally, regardless of size. They tend to be abiotic factors. So we're going to include things such as weather, natural disasters, and pollution. What you're seeing in the picture here is a forest fire. Okay, this is Yellowstone National Park, found in Wyoming here in the United States. And this particular fire took place in 1988, and this was basically the largest wildfire that had ever occurred in the history of the park. The reason why I mentioned the fire is that no matter how densely populated each of the different populations were in this particular ecological community, every single one of them was affected equally. So populations that are particularly dense to begin with are more likely to survive a density-independent population reducing event. And the reason why is that if they were very dense to start with, chances are pretty good that there's a lot of them left over afterwards to repopulate their group. Finally, let's talk about age structure diagrams. An age structure diagram is a helpful graphic organizer that provides a visual representation of the growth of population experiences as a function of age group as well as gender. And so age groupings are really important when you're talking about an age structure diagram, and the reason why is that the age groups will indicate to you which members of the population have reproductive capacity. For example, in humans, this typically is the age group between 15 and 44 years of age, as this is the time span during which females in the population are fertile prior to age 15 and after the age of 45. And this is typically, you'll find that the members of the population are not able to reproduce. So if we're going to determine if a population is growing, then what we need to do is look at the numbers of individuals in the pre-reproductive, which is prior to the age of 15 in humans, and reproductive stages, so prior to the age of 45, or between the ages of 15 and 44 rather. If there are a lot of individuals in those two portions of the population, then chances are pretty good that the population is growing. So for example, here in the diagram that you see, stage 1 and stage 2, you have two populations that are growing, one more rapidly than the other. If you look at stage 3, notice that the population is stable because the numbers of organisms or the numbers of the population that are in pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive stages are pretty equal here. But then notice in stage 4, what's happening there? Notice that your post-reproductive members of the population seem to have a larger proportion than the pre-reproductive and reproductive members of the population. So think about what that implies about this particular population. Age structure diagrams tend to tell a story about a population that does go beyond biology. Economic classes also study age structure diagrams as a function of socioeconomic status, life expectancy, birth rate, and death rate, because these things tend to affect economic resources as well. So when we talk about regulating population growth, we're not just talking about biology, we're also talking about subjects outside of science, economics, government, social studies, that sort of stuff.
In this lesson, hopefully you've learned about the factors that influence the regulation of population growth, both biological factors and non-biological factors. Now let's put the things that we've learned about population to use while we learn about community ecology and how populations interact to create ecological communities. So if you're ready to learn about community ecology, let's get started.